The universe screamed. Brother Sergeant Titus of the Ultramarines' 4th Company felt reality peel away like skin from burned flesh. One moment he stood on the bridge of the Resolve Eternal, a strike cruiser translating back to real space after routine patrol sweep through the ghoul stars. The next, the warp convulsed. Not with demonic corruption, not with the laughter of the ruinous powers, but with something else. Something clean and terrible and wrong. The Geller field shattered. Alarms shrieked in binaric cant. The navigator's panicked vox scream cut to static. Then light. Pure, searing, impossibly white light that swallowed the bridge whole. Titus had endured orbital bombardment, tyrannid bioplasma, and Necron Gaussflang. This was worse. This was annihilation. His ceramite plate groaned under impossible pressures. His primary heart stuttered. His secondary kicked in, flooding his veins with combat stims as his Laraman cells sealed microfractures blooming across his skin. He tasted copper and ozone. The litany of fortitude rose unbidden to his lips. The Emperor protects. In his name we endure. In his light we. The light swallowed the prayer and spat him into the void. Vacuum. His autosenses registered it instantly. 0 atmosphere, minus 270 degrees Celsius, hard radiation spiking his dosimeter. His armor's environmental seal engaged, recycling his last breath. Maglocks in his boots activated, searching for ferrous surfaces. He tumbled through darkness, spinning past jagged metal debris and sparking conduits. Something massive loomed ahead. A structure, cylindrical, kilometers long, studded with weapon emplacements and docking pylons. Not Imperial architecture. Wrong angles. Wrong materials. The hull plating gleamed too cleanly, unmarked by the Gothic script and purity seals that adorned every proper vessel. Xenos? The thought was automatic. His right hand found the grip of his Godwin pattern bolter, mag-locked to his thigh. His left steadied against a tumbling piece of wreckage. Some kind of reactor cowling, still warm, leaking coolant vapor that froze into glittering ice. Below, or what his disoriented vestibular system interpreted as below, a wound gaped in the station's hull. Molten metal cooled at the edges. His arrival point, the warp breach must have sheared through dimensions, punching him into where? When? Situational assessment. The Codex Astartes demanded clarity. He forced his breathing into combat rhythms, letting his implants compensate for the tumble. No stars he recognized. The station's running lights cast harsh white illumination, sterile and industrial. A nearby vessel, angular, dagger-shaped, utterly alien in design, bore markings in an unknown script. 6-pointed symbols. Geometric precision. Not Xenos. Worse. Human. Human but wrong. Corrupted. Apostate. He needed information. A klaxon wailed across the void. No sound. But his armor's auger array picked up electromagnetic pulses in rhythmic bursts. Warning. Alert. Something had noticed the hull breach. Movement flickered inside the wound. Figures in white armor, backlit by emergency lighting. Small. Baseline human size. They raised weapons, sleek, unfamiliar rifles with glowing apertures. Titus slammed maglock to the hull plating and drew his bolter. The muscle memory of 10,000 drills guided his stance. Brace, acquire, fire. The first bolt round erupted from the barrel with a thundercrack. His armor translated into bone conduction. The mass-reactive shell crossed 30 meters in a heartbeat, struck the lead figure center mass, and detonated. The white-armored soldier disintegrated in a spray of shrapnel and flame. The two behind him staggered, their formations breaking. Suboptimal armor. Titus logged the observation.
No ceramite.
Possibly plasteel or composites. Vulnerable to mass-reactive penetration. More figures poured from the breach. 12. 24. They opened fire. Bolts of red light energy weapons lanced across the gap. One grazed his pauldron. The ceramite bubbled, heat scoring visible in his peripheral vision. Hot enough to scar, not hot enough to penetrate. He squeezed the trigger in controlled bursts. 3-round groupings, Codex standard. Each shell found flesh. Bodies tumbled into vacuum, trailing frozen blood. The white armored soldiers scattered, seeking cover behind twisted bulkheads. But void combat offered no sanctuary. Titus Mag walked along the hull, circling, firing from angles they couldn't anticipate. Then the station itself responded. Automated turrets swiveled from recessed hardpoints. Quad-barreled cannons tracking with inhuman precision. Titus's autosenses screamed warnings. High-velocity ballistic threat. Evade. Evade. He kicked off the hull as the turrets opened fire. Not lost fire. Solid projectiles, glowing green, moving faster than anything except melta or plasma. They chewed through the wreckage where he'd stood, pulverizing metal into vapor. Aggressive doctrine. He twisted mid-flight, maglocking to a docking pylon, and returned fire at the nearest turret. Bolter shells hammered its armored housing. 1, 2, 3. The fourth punched through a coolant line. The turret seized, spewing pressurized gas, and went dark. But there were 6 more, and the white armored soldiers were regrouping, advancing under covering fire. Tactical withdrawal required. The codex was clear. Solo operations against numerically superior forces in unknown terrain demanded reconnaissance before engagement. He needed intelligence. He needed a Vox channel. He needed. The hull breach beckoned. Interior structure meant atmosphere, gravity, cover. Better odds than the killing field of open void. Titus sprinted across the hull, each magstep clanging silent in vacuum, and dove through the wound into the station's guts. Gravity seized him, stronger than expected, close to Macridge standard, and he hit the deck in a roll, bolter up, scanning for threats. Emergency klaxons wailed, now audible. Red lights strobed. The corridor stretched 50 meters, lined with conduits and blast doors. Bodies sprawled where his first volley had caught them. The white armored soldiers, their helmets shattered, faces visible beneath. Human. Baseline. Young. Unaugmented. Not space marines. Not traitor Astartes. Not chaos cultists. Then what? A voice crackled over the corridor's Vox system. Harsh, mechanical. Speaking a language he didn't know. The words meant nothing. The tone meant everything. Alert, lockdown, containment. Blast doors began to grind shut at both ends of the corridor. Titus ran. His ceramite boots thundered against the deck plating. 30 meters. 20. The far door was closing faster. He dropped his shoulder and hit it at full sprint. 2 tons of transhuman muscle and powered armor slammed into reinforced durasteel. The door buckled. Hydraulics shrieked. He shoved, forcing the gap wider, and squeezed through into the passage beyond. More corridors. More lights. The architecture was a labyrinth, industrial, utilitarian, but clean. No rust. No prayer scrolls. No incense burners or purity seals. Just cold efficiency. A thought, unbidden and poisonous, crept into his mind. What if the Emperor's light doesn't reach this place? He crushed it with a litany. I am the shield of humanity. I am the sword of Terra. My faith is my armor, and I shall not falter. But the corridor remained silent. No saiki crescenens. No sense of the Astronomican's distant light. Only the klaxons. Only the enemy closing in. And somewhere deeper in the station, something else stirred. Something vast and cold and ancient, waking to the presence of an anomaly that did not belong. The station was a maze of steel and silence. Titus moved through the corridors like a shadow, if shadows weighed 2 tons and left boot prints in deck plating. His autosenses painted the environment in thermal gradients and electromagnetic signatures. Power conduits thrummed behind walls. Coolant lines hissed. Somewhere distant, massive machinery cycled through industrial rhythms that reminded him of forge worlds. of Graia's manufactorums where titans took shape beneath the Omnissia's gaze. But there were no hymns here, no tech priests chanting in binaric, no servitors shuffling through their eternal routines. Just the sterile efficiency of a machine that had forgotten it served humanity at all. He'd bypassed 3 security checkpoints, avoiding clusters of the white-armored soldiers. They moved in squads of 10, weapons raised, searching methodically. Professional, disciplined, but unaugmented. Their reaction times were baseline human slow. When one patrol passed his hiding position, pressed into an alcove behind a coolant exchanger, he could have killed them all in 4 seconds. The Codex advised restraint. Unknown enemy, unknown terrain, unknown strategic objectives. Killing without purpose was wasteful. He needed intelligence first. A blast door ahead stood partially open, maintenance locked in mid-cycle. Beyond it, a massive chamber, cathedral vast, but serving industry instead of worship. His optics zoomed, compensating for distance and low light. Assembly lines stretched for kilometers. Skeletal frameworks of vessels hung suspended from gantries, smaller craft, fighter-sized, their hulls incomplete. Servitor analogs, no, machines, pure automata without wetware cores. Welded seams with precision lasers. Sparks cascaded like dying stars. The air tasted of ozone and hot metal. Shipyard. Naval construction facility. Strategic asset. Which meant command infrastructure. Communications arrays. Data repositories. A flicker of hope. If he could access their information networks, decode their language, determine his location. Halt! The voice boomed from behind him, amplified and mechanical.
Titus spun, bolte rising.
A figure stood 10 meters down the corridor, taller than the white-armored soldiers. Black armor, glossy and segmented like a beetle's carapace. A helmet that concealed all humanity, smooth and featureless except for a triangular visor that gleamed red. In its hands, a rifle, bulkier than the others, muzzle tracking Titus with inhuman steadiness. Officer analog. Command unit. Higher threat index. The figure spoke again, same language, words clipped and authoritative. When Titus didn't respond, it shifted stance, subtle weight redistribution that the Codex recognized as pre-combat positioning. Titus fired first. The bolt round crossed the gap faster than thought. The black-armored figure moved, reaction time beyond baseline human, augmented or cybernetic, but not fast enough. The shell clipped its shoulder, spinning it sideways. The mass reactive detonated. Armor plating shredded. The figure crashed against the wall, rifle clattering. But it didn't die. It rose, slowly, left arm dangling useless, sparking at the joint. Cybernetics. Not full conversion like a servitor, but augmented. The helmet turned toward Titus, and even through the visor he felt the weight of its gaze. Then it spoke, not to him, but into a vox bead built into its collar. A distress call. Coordinates. Warning. Titus put a second round through its chest. The figure collapsed, twitching, coolant and blood pooling beneath it. Tactical error. Now they knew his position. He'd traded stealth for a few seconds advantage, and the cost would be. The corridor lit up with red emergency lighting. Blast doors slammed shut ahead and behind. A new sound echoed through the station. Boots on metal. Dozens of them. Converging. Containment protocol. They were sealing him in a kill box. The Codex offered options. Fight through the encirclement, seek alternate routes, fortify and hold position. But all assumed reinforcements. All assumed resupply. All assumed his gene seed could be recovered if he fell. Here he was alone. The thought tasted like ash. He moved toward the blast door leading to the assembly chamber, mag-locking his bolter and drawing his combat knife. The door's locking mechanism was electronic, alien in design but following logical principles. Power conduit, control node, manual override. He jammed the blade into the seam, leveraging his armor's strength. Sparks flew. The door groaned, shifting a handspan. Enough. He slipped through into the assembly chamber and dropped 3 stories to the factory floor below. His armor's inertial compensators absorbed the impact with a pneumatic hiss. Around him, the automata continued their work, oblivious. Welding arcs flared. Assembly clamps rotated. A massive crane swung overhead, carrying a completed fighter fuselage toward a launch bay. Used the terrain. He sprinted toward the nearest gantry, vaulting onto a conveyor system that carried hull plates toward the assembly lines. The white-armored soldiers poured into the chamber from multiple access points. 2 squads, 3, 4. They spread out, weapons raised, scanning for him among the machinery. Titus crouched behind a half-finished fighter, assessing. 40 hostiles. For exits.
Unknown renforcement en route.
Ammunition. 73 bolt rounds remaining. Grenades. 2 frag, 1 crock. He could kill 30 before they flanked him. The rest would overwhelm through sheer numbers. Unacceptable. Then he saw it. A fuel line, pressurized, running along the ceiling toward the main reactor coupling. Bright yellow markings. Warning symbols in the alien script. High-energy volatile substance. Extreme hazard. Promethium analog. Or plasma coolant. Something that burned. Titus smiled behind his helmet. The Codex Astartes had a doctrine for this. When outnumbered, redefine the battlefield. He pulled the crock grenade from his belt. A melt-a-charge designed to crack armor plate, set the timer for 3 seconds, and hurled it toward the fuel line's junction point. The grenade arced through the air, tumbling end over end. The soldiers saw it. Some dove for cover. Others opened fire, lost bolts cutting through empty air. The grenade struck the junction dead center, and the world became fire. The explosion tore through the assembly chamber like the wrath of the God Emperor made manifest. A wall of flame roared outward, consuming machinery, automata, and soldiers alike. Secondary explosions rippled through fuel reserves. Gantries collapsed. The half-finished fighter beside Titus disintegrated into shrapnel. He threw himself flat, letting his armor's heat shielding absorb the worst of it, feeling ceramite blister and crack. The fire raged for 30 seconds. Then the station's suppression systems kicked in. Foam, inert gas, emergency bulkheads slamming down to contain the inferno. Klaxons wailed in new patterns, not containment alerts, but disaster protocols. Titus rose from the smoking wreckage. Bodies lay scattered, some still burning. The assembly chamber was a ruin, but the launch bay, visible through the thinning smoke, stood intact. Escape route. He ran toward it, past broken machinery and dying fires, his armor trailing smoke. Behind him, more soldiers flooded into the chamber. Ahead, the launch bay doors gaped open to the void beyond, and rows of completed fighters sat on maglocked cradles, awaiting deployment. Almost there. Then he felt it. Presence. Not physical. Not audible. A weight in the air, pressing against his mind like psychic pressure, but wrong, colder, more controlled, utterly devoid of the warp's madness. His psycho-conditioning flared, resisting mental intrusion. But this wasn't intrusion. This was observation. Something vast and terrible had turned its attention toward him. And it was coming. Titus reached the launch bay just as the station shuddered. The lights flickered. Every screen, every holographic display, every terminal in sight suddenly displayed the same symbol. A 6-pointed star inside a circle. Imperial markings. But not his Imperium. The Vox system crackled to life. A voice, deep, mechanical, augmented beyond humanity, spoke a single word in the alien tongue. He didn't understand the language, but he understood the tone. Judgment. The fighter was a coffin waiting to happen. Titus stood in the launch bay, staring at the sleek craft maglocked to its cradle. Alien design. Single-seat cockpit. Twin engines that hummed with barely contained energy. Control interfaces glowed with symbols he couldn't read.
No imperial runes. No purity seals.
No machine spirit to appease with litanies. But it had wings and it could fly, and the alternative was facing whatever presence now saturated the station like pressure before a storm. Adapt or die. The Codex was pragmatic when doctrine failed. He hauled himself into the cockpit, barely large enough for his armored bulk, and studied the controls. A flight stick, throttle, targeting display, trigger mechanisms. Universal principles of warcraft transcended languages. His fingers, too large for the delicate switches, punched commands through trial and error. The engines whined louder. The cockpit canopy hissed shut, sealing him in. Behind him, blast doors exploded inward. Not breached, not forced. Exploded, ripped from their housings and hurled across the launch bay like toys. Through the smoke strode a figure in black armor, taller than the soldiers, wreathed in a cloak that billowed despite the absence of wind. The red visor of its helmet swept across the bay, fixing on Titus with predatory certainty. And Titus felt it again. That presence, now localized, focused like a lance through his skull. Not psychic, not warp taint, something else entirely. Something that reached past his armor, past his conditioning, into the meat of his hindbrain and squeezed. Fear.
Pure. Primal. Chemical.
His adrenal glands dumped combat stims into his bloodstream. His heart's hammered. Every instinct screamed threat. Apex predator. Run. He slammed the throttle forward. The fighter rocketed from its cradle, engines screaming, launching into the void through the bay's atmospheric shield. Stars wheeled. The station fell away behind him, a massive cylinder bristling with weapons and docking pylons. And beyond it, a fleet. Dozens of vessels, angular and sharp, gathered like predators around a kill. His vox crackled, burst transmissions in the alien tongue, overlapping, urgent. The fighter's threat display lit up, red icons multiplying, pursuit craft launching from the station, larger vessels maneuvering into intercept vectors. Titus wrestled the control stick, forcing the fighter into evasive spirals. The craft responded sluggishly, too sensitive for his armored fingers, designed for baseline reflexes. Energy bolts lanced past his cockpit. Green fire that left afterimages burned into his retinas. One grazed his starboard wing. Alarms shrieked. Outnumbered. Outgunned. No support. But not outfought. Not yet. He twisted the fighter into a dive. No up or down in void combat. But his spatial awareness translated it thus. Burning toward a debris field left by his arrival. Shattered hull plates. Frozen coolant clouds. The corpses of soldiers flash-frozen in vacuum. He slalomed through the wreckage, using mass to break targeting locks. Pursuit craft followed, tighter formations, professional coordination. Then the station fired. Turbolaser batteries, massive cannons built to shred capital ships, opened up. Not at him, at the debris field. Green bolts the size of cargo haulers vaporized everything in their path, clearing the battlefield, removing his cover in an instant. Ruthless, they'd sacrifice their own dead to deny him advantage. Titus banked hard, pushing the fighter's engines past their safe tolerances. The thrust pushed him deep into his seat, ceramite groaning. He leveled out, acquired one of the pursuit craft in his targeting reticle, pure instinct, muscle memory from void combat drills, and triggered the fighter's weapons. Twin laser cannons spat red fire. The shots went wide. His aim was off, calibration wrong, reflexes too fast for the craft's sluggish response. The enemy pilot evaded easily, circling behind him. Suboptimal platform. This wasn't a Thunderhawk. This wasn't even a Storm Talon. This was a liability. More fighters closed in. 6, 8, a dozen. They moved in coordinated attack patterns, boxing him in, forcing him toward the station's kill zone. His threat display screamed warnings. Missile locks. Energy weapons charging. He had seconds. Then the largest vessel in the fleet, A dagger-shaped monster 3 kilometers long, rotated ponderously, bringing its broadside to bear. Not at the fighters. At him. The space between them seemed to contract. Distance became irrelevant. Titus felt it again. That presence, magnified 1,000-fold, reaching across the void like an invisible fist. His fighter's controls locked. The engines cut out. Every system died simultaneously, not from damage but from will. Something had simply decided his craft would cease functioning. And then he was falling. Not metaphorically, literally. His fighter tumbled end over end, powerless, trajectory carrying him back toward the station. The pursuing craft held formation but didn't fire. They didn't need to. He was already dead. They were just waiting for impact. Titus punched the canopy release. Explosive bolts fired, blowing the transparent shell into fragments. Void rushed in. His armor sealed instantly, mag boots activating. But momentum still carried him forward. Tumbling, spinning, the station looming larger with every heartbeat. 40 seconds to impact. He twisted mid-fall, orienting toward the station's hull, mag boots searching for purchase. 30 seconds. He could see individual hull plates now, maintenance hatches, sensor arrays. 20 seconds. The pursuing fighters peeled off, unwilling to risk collision. 10 seconds. He slammed into the hull at terminal velocity. Ceramite cracked. His primary heart stuttered. His Laraman cells went into overdrive, sealing internal hemorrhaging. Pain, white-hot, absolute, lanced through his torso. Ribs broken. Clavicle fractured. Right lung collapsed. His preomner filtered blood from his throat before he could choke. But he lived. He maglocked to the hull, gasping, cycling through combat stims and pain suppressors. His armor's integrity display painted red across multiple systems. Severe damage. Power cells at 60%. Auto repair functions engaged but limited. He needed rest. He needed an apothecary. He needed his battle brothers. He had none of those things. Movement caught his peripheral vision. A shuttle detaching from the massive dagger ship, burning toward the station with single-minded purpose. Not a combat craft. A transport, carrying someone important. The presence intensified. Closer now. Almost upon him. Titus forced himself upright, each movement agony, and Mag walked toward the nearest airlock. His bolter was intact, miraculously. 30 rounds left. 1 frag grenade. A combat knife chipped along its edge. The Emperor's tools were meager, but they would have to suffice. The airlock cycled open, emergency override, his brutal strength ripping past security protocols, and he stumbled inside. Gravity seized him. He collapsed to one knee, armor grinding, blood pooling inside his helmet. "Emperor, grant me strength," he whispered, the words bitter. "Let me die well. Let my gene seed return to Macridge. Let my name be." The corridor lights died. Every screen went dark. And in the blackness he heard it, breathing, mechanical, rhythmic, measured like the tick of a doomsday clock. Then light red, emanating from a single source at the corridor's far end. A lightsaber ignited, its crimson blade casting bloody shadows across the walls. And Darth Vader stepped forward. The Sith Lord stood like a monument to death. Titus had faced horrors across 100 battlefields. Tyrannid carnifexes that shrugged off lost cannon fire, Necron overlords phasing through reality, Chaos champions wreathed in warp flame. None had filled him with the instinctive dread he felt now, staring at the black-armored figure whose very presence seemed to compress the air, making it thick and suffocating. The crimson blade hummed, a sound like distant screaming. Red light painted the corridor in shades of blood and shadow. The mechanical breathing continued, steady, inevitable, the rhythm of an execution countdown.
Father spoke.
The voice was deep, augmented beyond humanity, resonating from speakers built into the helmet's vocabulator. Words in that alien tongue measured and cold. Titus didn't understand the language, but he understood the tone. Surrender or die. His answer was a bolt round. The shell erupted from his bolter's barrel, crossing 20 meters in a fraction of a heartbeat. Vader's free hand rose. Not to block, not to dodge, but simply rose, and the bolt round stopped. Mid-flight, frozen in space as if caught in amber. The mass-reactive fuse ticked down, primed to detonate, but the shell hung motionless 3 meters from Vader's outstretched palm. Then Vader clenched his fist. The bolt round crumpled like parchment, imploding into a compressed sphere of metal and propellant. He let it drop. It clattered against the deck, inert.
Impossible.
No psychic power Titus knew could arrest kinetic force so precisely. Psychic hoods deflected. Conversion fields refracted. But this was negation. Reality itself obeyed this figure's will. The Codex had no doctrine for this. Titus fired again. 3-round burst spread pattern, banking shots off the corridor walls to create unpredictable angles.
Vader's hand swept horizontally.
All 3 rounds arrested simultaneously, hanging in midair like accusations. Then they flew backward, ricocheting off the walls behind Titus in shrieking sparks. Telekinesis, unrestrained, instantaneous. Titus charged. The Codex taught that when range failed, close quarters decided battles. His ceramite boots pounded deck plating, each stride eating distance. 5 meters. 4. 3. He raised his combat knife, 40 centimeters of monomolecular-edged adamantium, and struck for the joint between helmet and gorget, the kill stroke that ended tyrant lords and traitor captains. Vader didn't move, didn't block, didn't parry. The lightsaber simply was blade-intercepting knife with surgical precision. The crimson edge bit into adamantium, and the impossible happened. It cut through. Not melted, not shattered. Cut, as if the knife were wax. The blade's severed tip clattered to the deck, still glowing orange. Titus's momentum carried him forward. He slammed his shoulder into Vader's chest, 2 tons of transhuman muscle and power armor behind the blow. The impact would have pulverized a baseline human, caved in power armor, staggered even a Terminator. Vader took 1 step backward. That was all. Then his hand, still outstretched, closed into a fist. Invisible pressure seized Titus's throat. Not hands, not a garrote. Force crushing inward, collapsing his trachea despite the armor's gorget reinforcement. His secondary heart kicked into overdrive, compensating for oxygen deprivation. His Laraman cells couldn't seal what wasn't bleeding. His psycho-conditioning couldn't resist what wasn't psychic. He clawed at his throat, fingers scrabbling uselessly against his own armor. His vision blurred, red creeping in from the edges. Hypoxia, asphyxiation, death by strangulation, a baseline human's fate, not a space marine's. Unacceptable. Titus stopped fighting the grip. Instead, he aimed his bolter, still maglocked to his right hand, and fired point-blank at Vader's torso. The Sith Lord released him. The bolt round flew true, striking Vader's chest plate dead center. The mass reactive detonated on impact. Shrapnel sprayed. Smoke billowed. Vader staggered, actually driven back 2 full steps. Titus collapsed, gasping. His throat a mass of bruised tissue. His secondary heart hammered. His primary struggled to restart. Blood filled his mouth, internal damage, Preomner working overtime to neutralize toxins his own body was producing. He forced himself to 1 knee, then upright, bolter tracking. Vader stood in the smoke, armor scorched but intact. The chest plate showed a crater where ceramite-equivalent plating had ablated, but the underlayer held. No blood, no breach, just a black mark against black armor. And the lightsaber still burning. The Sith Lord advanced. Not rushing, not charging. Walking with the inevitability of an execution detail. His breathing echoed. In. Titus fired again. For rounds, full auto, aiming for joints and optics. 2 rounds stopped mid-flight. One Vader deflected with his lightsaber, impossible reaction time, blade intercepting the shell's trajectory before impact. The 4th clipped his shoulder pauldron, detonating harmlessly against reinforced plating. Empty. The slide locked back.
No ammunition.
No grenades left. Only the broken knife and his armored fists. Faith and ceramite. Titus roared. A wordless battle cry that echoed through the corridor, and charged again. Vader's hand rose. Titus felt invisible pressure slam into his chest like a thunderhammer strike. He flew backward, crashing through a bulkhead, armor crumpling around the impact point. Alarms screamed. His right arm hung useless, servomotors shredded. His left leg wouldn't respond. Power cells at 30%. He dragged himself upright using the broken bulkhead. Blood ran freely inside his helmet now. His catalepsian node struggled to keep him conscious. His Susan membrane began initiating emergency hibernation protocols. No, not yet. Vader stepped through the shattered bulkhead, cape billowing, lightsaber raised for the killing stroke. And Titus spoke. Not in Gothic, not in words Vader would understand, but in the tongue of Ultramar, the last prayer of warriors who knew they faced their end. Courage and honor. Into the fires of battle, unto the anvil of war. The lightsaber descended. Titus caught it. Not with his hand, that would have been severed instantly. With his broken knife's hilt, the only object he still held.
Adamantium met plasma.
The lightsaber didn't cut through immediately, but it burned, melting the hilt in his grip. Pain seared his palm. His armor's pain suppressors maxed out. He held for 1 second, 2, 3. Then he kicked Vader in the knee. Transhuman strength, desperation-driven, delivered through a ceramite boot. The joint didn't break. Vader's armor was too resilient, but it shifted, throwing the Sith Lord off balance for a single heartbeat. Titus released the melting knife, lunged forward, and headbutt Vader's helmet with his own.
Ceramite met durasteel.
The impact rang like a bell. Titus's vision exploded into white stars. His skull fractured, hairline crack across the frontal bone, osmodula already working to reinforce. Vader stumbled backward, actually staggered. For one impossible moment, they stood face to face. 2 warriors, both more machine than man, both broken by wars that had consumed them. Then Vader's hand rose one final time, and Titus felt his armor crumple. Not the external plating, the internal structure, the servos, the neural interface connections, the life support systems, everything compressed inward, ceramite folding like paper, crushing him inside his own armor like a coffin collapsing. His ribs shattered, his spine fractured, his primary heart ruptured. He fell to his knees, gasping blood. Vader stood over him, lightsaber raised, crimson light painting the dying space marine in executioner's red. And he spoke again, same words as before, but now Titus understood their meaning through context, through the universal language of warriors who recognize each other across the gulf of galaxies. You fought well, but this ends now. Titus waited for the blade to fall. Death was an old companion. He'd stared into its maw on Damnos when Tyrannid warriors tore through his squad. He'd felt its breath on Cronus when a Necron Lord's warscythe cleaved his pauldron to the bone. He'd tasted it in the void above Mackridge when traitor fire punched through his boarding pod. Each time, duty had pulled him back. Each time, the Emperor's will had sustained him. But here, crushed inside his own armor, his gene seed unretrievable, his chapter ignorant of his fate, here, death would be final. Meaningless. A footnote in a galaxy that didn't know his Imperium existed. The lightsaber hummed above him, patient and terrible. Yet the killing stroke didn't fall. Vader stood motionless, head tilted slightly, studying him. The mechanical breathing continued its relentless rhythm. Behind the black helmet's red lenses, Titus sensed something, calculation perhaps, or recognition. the way a hunter might pause before a wounded predator, weighing whether it was safer to finish it or observe it further. When Vader spoke, his voice carried a different quality. Still mechanical, still cold, but something beneath it. Curiosity? You are not of this galaxy. Titus coughed blood. His preomner worked to filter the fluid filling his lungs, but the damage was catastrophic. Internal organs failing. His secondary heart labored alone, barely sustaining consciousness. He forced words through ruined vocal cords. I serve the Emperor. The words came in Gothic. Vader wouldn't understand them, but tone carried meaning. Defiance, faith, absolute conviction. Vader's head canted further, like a carrion bird examining prey. I sense no force in you, yet you survived the void without life support. You shattered blast doors with your hands. You are enhanced, constructed, a weapon made flesh. Titus said nothing. His vision grayed at the edges. His Susan membrane screamed warnings. Catastrophic damage. Initiating emergency hibernation. Neural activity reducing to minimal threshold. No. He forced himself to focus, cycling combat stims his body could barely process. If these were his final moments, he would face them conscious. He would not slip into darkness like a coward. Vader lowered the lightsaber slightly, not deactivating it but no longer poised to strike. When he spoke again, something shifted in his tone. Not warmth, nothing so human as that, but interest. The Empire wastes resources hunting rebels who scurry in the dark. You fought with purpose, with discipline, without fear. He stepped closer, looming over Titus like a monument. I was once a warrior like you, before I became what I am now, before I learned that power requires sacrifice, that duty demands obedience, that order is maintained through strength, not sentiment. Titus's enhanced hearing caught something beneath the mechanical vocalization, a ghost of bitterness, of regret. This creature had been human once, had served something, had believed in something, and that belief had been twisted into this. Vader's next words were deliberate, each syllable weighted with intent. You have no place to return to. Your technology is inferior. Your weapons inadequate. Your armor is broken. You are alone in a hostile galaxy, surrounded by enemies who will destroy you on sight. The lightsaber deactivated. Darkness rushed in, broken only by emergency lighting. But you need not die meaningless. The Empire offers purpose, structure, order. Join me. Serve as you were made to serve, as a weapon, a soldier, an instrument of dominion. I can teach you to harness powers beyond your primitive understanding. Together, we could bring order to a chaotic galaxy. You would have a purpose again. Silence filled the corridor. Titus stared up at the Sith Lord, his vision swimming. Part of him, the rational, tactical part shaped by the Codex, recognized the logic. He was defeated, isolated, resources depleted. Survival demanded pragmatism. The Emperor himself had made alliances of necessity during the Great Crusade. Had his own Imperium not once employed Xenos tech, demonic weapons, forbidden knowledge when extinction loomed? But another part, deeper, older, the part shaped by 10,000 years of faith hammered into gene-forged neural pathways, recoiled. This creature spoke of order, but Titus sensed the corruption beneath. Not chaos, something different, but corruption nonetheless. A twisting of purpose into tyranny, of duty into domination, of strength into oppression. The Emperor had taught that humanity's survival justified any cost. But he had also taught that some costs transformed survival into damnation. Titus thought of Macridge, of Gilliman's words etched into the fortress of Hera. A man's worth is measured not by the wars he wins, but by the principles he refuses to compromise. He thought of his battle brothers, Captain Titus, Brother Leandros, Sergeant Sidonus, their faces memory etched into his mind. He would never see them again, would never stand in the chapter's halls, would never hear the chaplains lead prayers at dawn. But he could die as one of them. He forced his ruined body upright, centimeter by agonizing centimeter, armor grinding, broken bones grating. Blood poured from his helmet's vents. His secondary heart gave a final, desperate surge. He rose to his knees, then, impossibly, to his feet, swaying like a tower on the verge of collapse. And he spoke, each word a struggle, each syllable bought with agony. I am Ultramarine, son of Gilliman, warrior of the God Emperor. I will never kneel to tyrants. The words came in Gothic. Vader wouldn't understand them, but he would understand what followed. Titus drew himself to attention. Parade ground perfect despite the shattered armor, despite the failing organs, despite the darkness closing in. His right hand rose in the Aquila salute, fist over heart, fingers spread like the Emperor's eagle. And he spoke the final prayer every space marine knew, the words that echoed through 10 millennia of endless war. My armor is contempt. My shield is disgust. My sword is hatred. In the Emperor's name, let none survive. Vader stood silent, lightsaber hanging at his side. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the Sith Lord's breathing shifted, not in pattern, but in quality. Something that might have been respect, or perhaps regret. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, almost weary. You choose extinction over evolution, death over power. So be it. You are a relic of a forgotten age. And relics. The lightsaber ignited again, crimson blade casting bloody light across Titus's broken form. Belong in tombs. Vader raised the blade, and this time Titus knew the killing stroke would fall. He closed his eyes, not in fear, but in acceptance. His thoughts turned to Macridge one final time, to the chapter fortress, to the Hall of Heroes where his name would never be inscribed, to the gene seed vault where his legacy would never rest. Forgive me, brothers. I tried to return. I tried to die well. But this galaxy is not ours. And I am just one man. The lightsaber descended. The blade fell like judgment. Titus felt it before it struck. A line of heat across his gorget seal, the one vulnerable point where helmet met chest plate. The lightsaber carved through ceramite that had withstood bolter fire and tyrannid claws, through adamantium weave that had turned power weapons aside. It met no resistance. Physics itself seemed to part before that crimson edge. The sensation was strange. Not pain. His nervous system was too damaged, his pain suppressors too flooded with chemicals, but absence. A sudden void where connection had been. His helmet's heads-up display flickered, then died. Autosenses went dark. Vox systems fell silent. The neural interface that linked his mind to his armor's machine spirit severed like a cut cord. He was alone inside his own skull for the first time in decades. The helmet fell. It hit the deck with a hollow clang, rolling once before settling face up, dead optics staring at nothing. Titus's bare face emerged into the corridor's red emergency lighting. Pale skin, gene-forged features too perfect to be baseline human, a network of interface ports studding his temples and neck. His eyes, ice blue, Ultramar-born, met Vader's crimson lenses without flinching. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Vader spoke, and his voice held something Titus hadn't expected. Acknowledgement. You could have been useful. Instead, you chose to be noble. The Sith Lord raised his lightsaber one final time, angling for the heart. The killing stroke. The mercy cut. In my experience, nobility is just another word for waste. Titus didn't close his eyes, didn't look away. The Codex Astartes taught that a warrior's final duty was to die with his gaze forward, denying his killer the satisfaction of broken will. But as Vader moved, as the lightsaber began its descent, something flickered across the Sith Lord's stance. A hesitation. Minute. Barely perceptible. A single degree of deviation in the blade's arc. the memory of another warrior who'd refused to kneel, another idealist who'd chosen death over compromise, a young Jedi, perhaps, or a clone commander who'd disobeyed Order 66, or, deeper, older, buried beneath decades of machinery and dark side corruption, a slave boy who'd once believed that people were more important than power. Anakin Skywalker was dead. Vader had killed him, but corpses sometimes left ghosts. The lightsaber completed its arc, and missed the heart by 3 centimeters. The blade punched through Titus's left lung instead. Catastrophic damage, instantly fatal to a baseline human, but not immediately lethal to a Space Marine's redundant biology. His secondary heart surged. His Laraman cells flooded the wound. His preomner filtered blood from his remaining lung. His Susan membrane finally won its battle, slamming his consciousness into emergency hibernation. Titus collapsed. His body struck the deck like falling stone, armor clanging, blood pooling beneath him. His eyes remained open, catalepsy no damage preventing proper shutdown, but the light behind them dimmed. Breath came in shallow gasps. Hearts beat in unsynchronized rhythms. He was dying, but not dead. Not yet. Vader stood over him, lightsaber still ignited, staring down at the broken Space Marine. The mechanical breathing continued its rhythm. In. When he spoke, it was to himself, or perhaps to a ghost only he could see. Sentiment. Even after all this time, the weakness persists. He deactivated the lightsaber. Darkness rushed in. Behind him, the corridor filled with stormtroopers. A full platoon, weapons raised, finally arrived after the alarms and explosions. Their commander stepped forward, helmet turning between Vader and Titus. Lord Vader, the anomaly, should we terminate it? Vader was silent for a long moment. Then, no. Place it in stasis. Transfer it to the inexorable will. I want it studied, dissected, its augmentations catalogued. Whatever made it may prove useful to the Empire. The commander hesitated. My lord, it's still alive. Barely. If we attempt to move it, then ensure it dies in a controlled environment. Vader's voice held finality. Not here. Not on this station. Not like this. He turned, cape sweeping, and strode toward the corridor's exit. The stormtroopers parted before him like water. Behind him, medical droids flooded in, repulsor sleds hovering, scanning equipment buzzing over Titus's ruined form. One of the droids chirped in binary. Severe trauma, multiple organ failure, neural activity minimal. Prognosis, terminal within 6 standard hours. Another responded, anatomy unknown.
Augmentation extensive.
Recommend cryostasis pending further analysis. They loaded Titus onto a sled, mag clamps securing his bulk. His blood left a trail across the deck as they moved him toward the medical bay. His eyes remained open, unseeing, consciousness buried beneath layers of emergency protocols and failing biology. But somewhere, deep in his mind where the gene seed lived, where the Emperor's will had been etched into his very DNA, a thought flickered. I did not kneel. I kept faith. Even at the end.